Good afternoon and welcome to the Healthy Indoors Show. I'm your host, Bob Krell, publisher of Healthy Indoors magazine. This is the start, signifies the start of a new season, our season 4, the fall season 2020. Real excited with what we've got to offer for you today. We'll be getting into kind of a culmination of a lot of the things we've been speaking about the last several months prior to our break, talking about indoor environmental conditions, making your indoor environments healthier, safer, and some of the trends that are coming about based on some of our situations in the world today, such as the global COVID-19 pandemic, and more recently even wildfires. Just a lot of stuff going on that really could be adversely affecting the air in your indoor environments. So with us today, I've got a host of guys here. I do some intros. Joining us today will be John Blomer, who's the Executive Advisor and Engineering Fellow at Aprilaire. Dave Carlson, who is also Aprilaire's Marketing Director, and Joseph Hillenmeyer, who is their new construction channel manager. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good.
So we're going to cover a lot of territory today, so I might as well jump right into it because 60 minutes is going to be tough to get through all of this. But I'm going to start out with actually giving John the lead here. One of the I think important areas, right, that we want to talk about are just some of the guidance that's out there in the industry. ASHRAE and CDC are constantly putting stuff out there. There's been a series of late recommendations and guidance coming out in response to the pandemic, but there's basically some bottom line mechanical system issues that we probably need to be concerned about, right, for the indoor environment. So I'd like to let you run with some of your thoughts on this, John. Tell us a little bit about that focus and what we should be looking at.
Thanks, Bob. There's really three key aspects to indoor air quality, and they're bringing in fresh air, filtering your air, and controlling the humidity in your home. With things that are going on today, those really came flying to the top of the ladder. When we take things, events like COVID, ventilation was one of the best things you could do. Ventilation and properly controlling your humidity. With the case of the wildfires, air cleaning and filtering is one of the better things you could do. So the guidance from the organizations like CDC and ASHRAE through the COVID event has really been ventilate, ventilate, ventilate. Turn it on, run as much as you can, run your air cleaners, and control your humidity. So those are the best things you can be doing.
But I'm assuming that where you're going with this is not necessarily one size fits all here, right? As far as there's going to be different approaches to addressing different situations, correct?
There is. I mean, in normal times, doing these things just promote good, healthy air. In the case of something like COVID, turning on ventilation so that it runs as much as possible, let's call it full time, brings in as much fresh air as you can. And the flip to that is out west with the wildfires, you may want to shut ventilation down and run your air cleaner full time inside your home. And when I say air cleaner, I'm talking about a MERV 13 or higher filtration on your system. And so it isn't one thing fits all, and it's creating systems that allow the homeowner to also interact with it. So let's just go back to the happy good times. It's a beautiful fall day here in Madison, Wisconsin. It might be a homeowner may just want to turn on their ventilation to bring in some really good fresh air from outside, or they're having a party or burnt the toast in their house. They can turn on ventilation and air cleaning to help remove odors in their home. So when we think about these systems, we need them to be dynamic and not static, and we need to allow the homeowner to interact with them a little bit, and remind the homeowner to where to set them when they're done interacting, or turn them back on in the case of if you shut off your ventilation out in California, in a couple of days, make sure you turn it back on.
So you're basically one of the engineering gurus at Aprilaire, and so I'm assuming they're leaning on on you on a lot of current topics, right? And has your organization's focus on indoor air quality and IAQ issues changed regarding the pandemic?
Not at all. Not at all. We've always been promoting indoor air quality for our, 50-year history as April Air. Um, it just comes. It's. I was talking with some people at Lawrence Berkeley last week, and who are in the same area, and it's something we've been talking about for our careers, and all of a sudden it's front and center. It's good, but it's also bad. We really didn't want this. So it's nothing new. It's just now I think the homeowners and the world has started to understand the importance of indoor air quality, especially in our homes, where when we go to build a home or we're looking at replacing our HVAC systems or upgrading them, it's a conversation the homeowners now will want to have is, oh, I do want to have some indoor air quality in my house, and what products are available. So it's just helped the conversation along.
So I think what's interesting is, there seems to be obviously a heavy focus on ventilation now and being able to improve ventilation, but and that was one of the three pillars you were mentioning: the ventilation, the filtration, and the humidity control. But from a ventilation standpoint, that's also not a one size fits all, right? Because your ventilation strategy is somewhat dependent on your climate and time of year. Is that not true?
Absolutely true. I mean, if we take and say there's a minimum ventilation rate, and I'll pick ASHRAE 62 too as the pretty much the industry accepted minimum ventilation rate. There's different ways to bring in that fresh air, but there's also that's a minimum. So there's the ability for a homeowner to say, I'd like a little bit more than minimum is good. And then just giving that homeowner guidance, because when they're bringing in fresh air from, in the southeast, when it's hot and humid, we need to remove that humidity from the house. When they're bringing in, fresh air from the cold north during the winter, we need to humidify that air a little bit. So it's something that we're really good at, is trying to help the homeowner through those decisions. We call it engineered simplicity, because my phrase is, I'll never teach my mother about humidity. And how do we help the homeowner make those decisions of comfort and energy savings and health, right? It's a balance of three pillars.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for all of us, in the industry, right? To actually try to come up with workable approaches that we can, that can get disseminated down to the consumer level where they have an understanding of what they're getting into. Now you mentioned filtration. Obviously, that was your second point, and you've been referencing MERV 13 filters. Let's talk a little bit more about filtration in how can that be a consideration, and are there not indeed limitations, though, with some existing mechanical equipment, especially in residential systems, of what degree of filtration they can actually put in those systems from the pressure drops and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of filtration as, I always try to do it as a sponge. If I have a big sponge, I can absorb more things quicker. If I have a small sponge, it's harder to absorb things. So if you take your typical 1-inch filter that is in most homes as a minimum filter, they may have limitations as they try to increase their MERV rate. And it really depends upon the whole system design and how it was put together. I mean, there's a lot of variables in there, so it's a general statement. But as they increase the filter depth, like our filters are 4 inches deep, the pressure drops are actually lower on those. And we can put MERV 16 level filtration in systems at lower pressure drop than a 1-inch filter or MERV 8 by just making the sponge bigger. It's not a lot of added cost to do this. But it can be a little difficult because you might have to move some ductwork, but at a change out, it's a fairly simple thing to do. To do it as a phone call to walk in and change out, it could be a little difficult to change it. But yeah, if you're going to stay with the filter type, and most homes have that 1-inch filter, there are limitations to where they might cause some problems with their HVAC system.
Well, yeah, because it's a function of surface area, right? And so
Yep.
you can only get if you have so much depth, you can only stick so much media folded up as an accordion in there. So,
Correct. You got it.
but I think those modifications make sense that you mentioned, because again, going forward, I just don't see us continuing having homeowners just use those 1-inch, fiberglass filters that you can look through and see the person on the other side of it. I just can't see an awful lot of value in those. They stop leaves and maybe like kitty hairballs from getting into the fan, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I think as an industry, we're changing. We're starting to recognize that. That 1-inch filter was originally put in there to protect the equipment more than anything.
Right.
And like you said, to stop the cat from being able to walk through and get caught in the fan. But we're starting to change it as an industry, and people are starting to ask for indoor air quality, and they're willing to have that conversation now. And that's what's exciting.
Well, another probably the biggest issue, John, also that we know with the 1-inch filters is that they're just not changed often enough, and you're putting onus on the homeowner to go down there and maintain this equipment on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis, as opposed to once or twice a year.
Yeah, but that raises an interesting comment too. It's like, how much can we anticipate that homeowners will actually do as far as service on their equipment?
Well, and
I'm guilty too. Okay,
Yep.
I'm a guy who's been an IQ consultant for 34 years, a trainer, a publisher. I've been doing this stuff all my life, and it takes forever for me to get off my butt and go down and switch out my my MERV 13 filter to actually get around to doing it.
It's a very good point. Very good point. And again, it's a surface area thing. So the bigger the filter, the less frequent you have to change. Ours, we recommend changing once a year. So it's kind of like a battery in your smoke detector again, which I'm not guilty of doing every year either. But it's an easier interval to remember versus every 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. So it helps with that. And then you see products on the market, and our products also do it, where we're trying to notify customers. So through your app, you can easily set up service reminders that pop up on a notification, say, hey, it's time, go get your filter. So I think as an industry, that's where we need to go, is to help the consumer maintain, select, and use their equipment properly, and help them make the decisions that they can balance energy use and health and ease of use. And that's where we need to go as an industry.
And you're seeing the prevalence of more technology, right, in many homes. Maybe as an opportunity to help handhold a little better by utilizing the technology, because I think many people are, they're intimidated by tech. And the funny thing is, like, I'm the epitome of that. I'm sitting here engineering a live video broadcast and doing all that, and have all this high tech equipment, but I can't control my DVR on my television very well, and I think a lot of people fall into that.
Yeah, that's it. The beauty of technology is it does allow us to start to enable those things. And the challenge is not to make it overly complex with the technology, to make it little pop-ups, but don't overwhelm people with the technology. So that's our challenge.
So one of the last point that you brought at the start of this show today, you talked about humidity, and how does that the indoor humidity control factor into things like virus transmission, which is a topic that I think is on the forefront of many people's minds. So is that really a way that we can help improve the healthiness of our indoor environments during this pandemic?
Absolutely. Humidity from the beginning is very important. We're not built to live in the deserts of the world, right? So our bodies like to be in this 40 to 60% RH range. But when we're in that, to the virus specifically, when we sneeze, when we cough, when we expel particles of moisture, and then in those particles are viruses. And the big viruses fall to the floor, and most of the viruses are, quickly fall to the floor. That's kind of where that 6-foot rule is coming in. But the other part of the particles are small little ones, the 2.5 micron word that we all hear about, and those tend to be more buoyant and float around the house. Well, if your humidity is too dry, the big particles evaporate, get smaller, and so they float more. And so that's why you need to control that humidity, is don't let those particles float around, get the big particles to the ground, don't let the other particles float around as much. And then the particles that are floating around can be, removed through ventilation and air cleaning.
And I guess there's an important point to, to clarify here too, for people that may not have picked up on that. The particles, when you're talking the droplet sizes, right? That are
Correct.
typically going to be like mucus particles that are flying around. And as they potentially evaporate, they get smaller. But the viral materials, the actual virus particles, are quite small to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
They're entrained in a big droplet of liquid.
You got it. There's lots of them in that droplet of fluid. Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
And the other thing with the humidity is that's also where our body's immune system and filtration system works the best, because our mucous membranes are now moist. They do better filtering particles, and our bodies are healthier. So we have our natural immune systems work better in that 40 to 60% range. So that's
it's comfort factor too. I mean,
yes, humidity makes you more comfortable at lower temperatures, and less humidity makes you comfortable at higher temperatures. Your house is more stable. Your wood floors don't crack. You don't get the static electricity. You get everything that we've been saying for 40 or 50 years. But now the virus thing is at the top of that list.
Excellent. Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit, talk now about the consumer landscape. And, what are some of the things that I think are popping up on the consumer side, as it relates to controlling your healthy indoor environments? Healthy home seems to be a term that's searching really wildly on Google in the past year or two. That is not just, it's not just that it's a Google keyword search. I think people are more concerned about that now. And perhaps even now during the pandemic, while we're spending more time in our home environments than ever before, it could even be more important. So to that end, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go over to Dave Carlson and have him just talk a little bit about what he's seen on consumer behavior, and how maybe some of the messaging and branding, and what's ringing true with consumers right now, I guess.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. As the world continues to slowly reopen and then reclose, we're finding ourselves in spaces like grocery stores and restaurants and schools and office buildings, recognizing that they're not as healthy as we once thought. So there's been a surge in new studies and communication online and in print about this, with Bloomberg, WHO, or WHO, CDC, I think John mentioned earlier, Columbia and Harvard studies, ASHRAE. They're all talking about the overlooked basics that we have been talking about for 50 plus years, is, about the air that we breathe. So the ventilation, the filtration, and humidity control. Again, not to reiterate those 3 points, but they are the most important 3 things that you can consider when looking at your home. And, with the amount of time that we're spending in our home, you can see that reconstruction or, home building, those homes are all surging because people are in their home, they're spending more time there. Now they're also looking at the air that they're breathing and understanding that they can make it a healthier environment for themselves and their families. So as you mentioned, Google Trends, they're seeing a 150% increase in the indoor air quality topics. So things like, how do I make my indoor air quality better? Those things are just surging. People are looking, they're seeking education and trying to find that understanding of how they can improve their air. So we, at April Air, we've been talking about this for a very long time. Our content is definitely, built and directed at, education. That's our goal, is to educate people on the importance of healthy air.
So now your marketplace with your firm, you deal, you obviously deal with contractors, you deal with that wholesale market, but you also deal directly to consumers. Is that true?
That is true. Yes.
So, how do you, because the branding and addressing information at consumer level is challenging. I know with Healthy Indoors, we do that too. We're a B2B and B2C publication simultaneously, which I was told 8 years ago when we started the publication is impossible. And my defiant answer, not having been a publisher before, was, we could do that. Yeah. But it is a challenge, right? The messaging and the key to be able to talk to both the sector that does the work and does the installation and sells the equipment, and then talk to the end user consumers that use your equipment. So how do you do that? How do you delineate?
That is definitely a challenge, but it's kind of like what John had mentioned earlier, talking, taking it to that level that you could talk to your mom about it. and I think everybody appreciates that. Now, when we're talking to the consumer, the B2B side, or B2C side, I'm sorry, when we're talking to the B2C side, we are trying to take that level of education down to where they can understand it. And the B2B side, we give them that level, but then reinforce it with, the facts that go along behind that.
I mean, what's triggering? I mean, what do you see? Because you're on the marketing side for April, or what do you see as consumers? What's triggering them right now? What are they specifically looking for? Are there certain, you see some trends? Anything that's going on here, and without divulging like your marketing sauce for your organization?
Yeah, I mean, so again, wildfires has definitely, sparked a lot of interest for air purifiers and air purification and what they can do. They're also even looking for plants that they can have in their home. What plants bring better air quality to my house? Ventilation is something that since I've been here, I've only been with the company almost 4 years now. And the first few years, ventilation was not something that consumers were looking for at all. That's not even something that they spoke of. This year, it has become front and center and under the spotlight. So ventilation is, again, I think it goes back to the education and understanding. There, people are just seeking that information. They want to know what does it mean? Why am I not ventilating my home? I should be. So I'd say ventilation right now is the key topic that everybody's looking for.
So on the commercial side or the business side, what are you seeing from the contractor side? Like, are they, are they driven to do this? Because it seems like, from my experience, and having been a consultant and a contractor in the industry for years, it seems like it's almost like dragging people with their feet dug in, in the construction side to change how they do things. And at least that's been my experience over the years. They're not. That's a group of people that are not readily looking for change.
Yeah, and oftentimes they won't change. But when there's something like this, something that pushes us so fast and so in a direction that we have no choice. When healthy air was something that we've been talking about for years, and it was difficult to get, the B2B side to truly understand that they still wanted to talk comfort. And, we have contractors that say it's very difficult to be comfortable if you're not healthy. So, they understood that healthy air message. But now, COVID has pushed or anything that we have going on right now with the hurricanes, the wildfires, virus infection, COVID specifically, has pushed us so fast forward into the digital age. Imagine doing 8 hours of video conference a day, even 2 months ago, even 4 months ago, that was unheard of. Now totally. We're all accustomed to it, and it's expected, to be quite honest with you. So I think all great changes take just one thing that pushes us into that. So healthy air is now very comfortable to say, and it's understood now too.
I mean, there's clearly the pandemic has clearly been a catalyst, and certainly the emergence of wildfires in the past several years, right? I mean, we've had wildfires forever, but it seems like the last 2 to 4 years they've been increasing in severity and numbers. So so I think that's a big deal.
Bob, another interesting point about, I just think on the stubbornness of the contractors, or, maybe how these new technologies eventually make it in. And as Dave said, you kind of takes this one event, I think when we were still offline, John mentioned Title 24, which was some legislation in California that was pushing for much stronger filtration, better ventilation, and the stopgaps that they could come up with to avoid doing that, from grandfathering in permits and everything, were everywhere. Then you have these events where the consumer is asking for it, and that's what eventually turns the tide on the trade to say, okay, now this is something I can incorporate, something I can offer that maybe didn't seem worth it before, when the easier option was just to resist it. Once you've got the consumer asking for it, that's no longer the easy option. So sometimes even legislation is not as powerful as just what the people buying and living in homes want.
Consumer demand.
Yeah, which I guess like that really tips it over to you, Joseph, as far as that HVAC market. Are you seeing that in the recent events, right? The pandemic and really the advent of even more severe weather events and wildfires and that sort of thing. Are you seeing builders and contractors now embracing IAQ recommendations more? Is that and trying to communicate that as part of their messaging to their customers?
Yeah, and I think one thing that they're approaching us and all IAQ manufacturers about is, as much as the products, is kind of the messaging. And what are the claims? What can we say as a builder that we can do for the health and the air in the home. And I think when you look at how builders got on the IAQ path, it very much started out with energy efficiency. I mean, we built a tight home, and it's funny. Dave mentioned how just a few years ago, consumers didn't care about ventilation. They didn't. But who did was builders, because to build a house to code, you had to have proper ventilation as you tightened it up. And an interesting thing we've seen with them is they're finally, they're understanding now that that ventilator they have in there is a marketable appliance. I mean, it's an asset in the home, that it's not just there because they needed to do it for code. It's providing a healthier environment. So I think it started there. Just like that was sort of the first product that went into the home. That's the first one they've kind of gotten comfortable, explaining why it's there and what it's doing. It's bringing in that fresh air. And so there's certainly been a pickup this year as far as people trying to take these products and build this health message around them, as opposed to just doing them because they've been, mandated to in one way or another. And they're talking about it more. Their sales teams are incorporating it into, model home tours and things like that, where, we used to guess that probably even in builders we worked with, their sales team, if they understood it really well, maybe spent 30 seconds or a minute on IAQ. I assure you, it's in some builders that might be up to 5 minutes. So
there you go. Well, but that's a big thing. So you're seeing, you're seeing that as a trend. You think nationally that there's more of a drive from the contractor and builder community to actually push this?
Well, and we're seeing it more with the production builders too. More of them asking about it. You've always had on the higher end homes, where that cost is more easily passed on. I think that was embraced a long time ago. There was actually an article today in the LA Times about dirty air is everywhere in California. Now healthy air is a luxury, and it shouldn't be. And I think builders understand that you don't need to. You shouldn't have to pay to have healthy air in the home. And obviously no one's going to sell a healthy option and an unhealthy option. So, now that the consumer has the understanding. Yeah.
It's like, would you like the, we can give you this unhealthy house at a 20% discount.
Yeah. I suppose there's some people that would maybe take them up on that, but it's always easier to just standardize on these better solutions for indoor air quality. And I think they're understanding that now, and they're seeing the other benefits too. As we talked about with the HVAC trade, these larger filters do a better job of protecting the equipment. So there's warranty issues there that the builders can take advantage of. So I think we're seeing, the energy efficiency aspects, the smart home aspects, and just the wellness trends together kind of come in. And then you add COVID and the wildfire to it, and we're just at the epicenter, I think, of builder understanding, consumer desire, the trade guys being more willing to talk about it. So it's probably not going to get much stronger than it is right now. I think it's just going to continue up. It's a really incredible time to be in this industry. And as John said, we're certainly not happy about the reason why, but it is great to see that message really getting out there and understood by more people. And, the other thing about the builders is they generally, they understand it more at the level of the consumer, because that's who they have to sell it to almost instantaneously. With the contractor, we could spend a little bit more time on pressure drop and all of that. Builder doesn't care about that anymore, and the consumer does,
do you see this as, so this trend, maybe more focus on indoor environmental or healthy homes? Is this short term? Do you think this is gonna, if we get back to some semblance of normalcy at the end of 2021 or whenever that time might be, and whatever that might actually look like, do you think this is something that will regress back, or is this now you see this as a continuing trend?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. There was a few years ago I believe it was a Tech Home show, that a gentleman from BDX spoke about the Kano model as it related to smart home, which is sort of where a product shifts from, luxury and new and exciting to standardized to have. So basically, it's like keyless entry on cars is one that's used. For a while that was something you would pay extra for. Now you're not going to buy a car that doesn't have keyless entry. And I think smart home was the first home building trend that we kind of saw that in recently, where, at first it was, oh, hey, this home has, this smart technology and that smart technology. You're going to be hard pressed to find a new home now that, probably doesn't have a Ring doorbell, right? I mean, those things they became very standard. They're things that we expect to see in a new home. It's one of the reasons you're buying a new home. And I think that healthy air is I think it's reached that point right now, and it's just going to continue there. It's it's going to catch on because it's going to be less of an upgrade and more of a standardization as we move forward in the industry.
Yeah,
And
I would
I
agree
think
with Joseph. Sorry,
I was
Bob.
gonna,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I have a tendency because I just wanted to jump on something that Joseph said and it finally rang true in my mind. I have a tendency, or at least I find myself lumping contractors and builders in the same mix, and that's really wrong, right? Because there's
We
totally
made that
different.
mistake too.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, the contractor, like you think in terms of mechanical contractors that are doing HVAC, they have a certain perspective. They're looking at the world from manual J and manual D, and in theory, they're looking at it in that way. Whereas the builder, not so much, right? They're more at 10,000 feet selling product to
Yeah, and
consumers.
and it kind of goes back to the B2B, B2C conversation that you guys had earlier. And there's and don't get me wrong, there are people at every builder that do understand this stuff. I mean, there are some building scientists there that know more about indoor air quality than anyone you'd ever want to meet. They certainly understand their building envelope and how these mechanicals impact that. But when you're at the level where you're trying to get these into the home as a marketable feature, you got to speak a language that the people that are selling those homes to the home buyer can understand. And I think that's where we sort of saw the break is, it's one thing to get the building science guy on board to understand that these products are important, but improving the design of the home isn't always necessarily the same as improving the saleability of the home. So we've realized that to focus on that, you got to get that consumer message in there. You got to get that consumer understanding. You got to show them why it's important, and you got to teach them how to educate the people that are going to buy their homes on it. And that's where I think the changes we've made to our consumer marketing and the great growth we've seen there have really helped us in the home builder market as well. It's going, this is how we explain this to people who aren't living this every day, who don't want to hear about MERV ratings, who just want to know that they're getting a healthier product.
Well, what do you guys do? Collectively, what do you do as an organization to both maybe modify or move products development forward to maybe enhance what you currently do, and how do you keep a pulse on this is really a multifold question here, so you're all going to get a chance to answer, and how do you guys keep a pulse on that, to monitor whether you're really following those trends, and and what are going to be the things that resonate, because you're selling directly to consumers, but you sell to builders effectively, and you sell to contractors. I mean, you sell to all sectors of the market at one level or another, correct? So you have to really be in tune with all the motivating factors at all those demographics. How do you do that? Who wants to jump in with part of that answer?
I'll take the first swing. It's a real team approach. Because I'll spend a lot of time in the building science world. I'll spend time with the DOEs, the EPAs, and the CDCs of the world, understanding the technologies and what's coming on, and with the builders, and talking engineering lingo. And then you start to hand it over to the people that are really skilled, like Dave and Joe, and they start to take my stuff and can boil it down into language the contractor understands, and more importantly, the consumer. So it's a real team effort inside of Aprilaire, how we do that. And sometimes it comes from the bottom, from the consumer back to us too. So.
But that's been accelerated now, right, with the pandemic to some extent? I mean, or as far as, does your message and your branding have to be modified a bit, or or no, or were you guys already there and this is just a great opportunity?
Yeah, we actually were already there. We were taking this path. So, I mean, our message that we've been trying to say for a long time has just been highlighted. We've been trying to make the invisible visible for a very long time, and this really did it. It's almost, when you asked earlier, is this a trend that's going to go away or not? I'd equate this to water. The idea of drinking dirty water is gone. No one's going to go back to that,
Hopefully.
to the years. Yes. To the years where filtered water was, a luxury, if you will. So I think that, the opportunity here it's opened itself up. So people do see it now. And now our message is just being heard in a different light.
Yeah, I think another thing that is really, John talked about it being it's a team effort internally, but I believe it's also become more of a team effort externally. We've realized how many other organizations, have have their hand in the pot for healthy air. I mean, there's energy raters. A large portion of what they do when they go into a no home is, yes, they're looking for energy efficiency, but they also monitor a lot of the code compliance in there, and that includes ventilation. So getting those folks on board, understanding what a good product is to them, what they believe it needs to do, how do you make it easier for them to measure the airflow and the effectiveness of that product? John mentioned the DOE. They're of course highly involved in all these things, because there's a big connection between energy efficiency and IAQ that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think of, but it is there. So, getting information from all of those organizations to understand how these products work in every geography, every home, every application, and for all these different departments and interests, I think is something that we're getting much better at. And we've got, we got people talking to, all sorts of new trades all the time where it might be incorporated. So it's been a really exciting time.
Well, and it's interesting too that this is not it's not a new concept, right? But there always used to be this this paradigm, I think, that at least for years, I've been in the IQ industry for longer than I'd like to admit, but even back like in the early 80s when I first started getting involved in it, there was always this thought of, well, you can have energy efficiency or you can have good indoor air quality, and you have to, it's a balance, right? You always have to give up one for the other. I just don't see it that way anymore. I don't think the consumers are going to accept that either. Nobody wants to be an energy glutton, but on the other hand, they're worried about the healthy indoor environments. And are you seeing, I guess, to all three of you, the question is, selling on energy efficiency has never been that effective. I spent some time in building performance as well, and it always seemed like that was a hard sell. It's what's your payback? You're trying to sell everything on payback.
Yeah, I think anytime you have to do payback, it's a hard sell.
It's hard.
It's
a hard
that upfront dollar, especially if you're looking at the incorporation of solar panels or something like that. Those are massive upfront costs, and extrapolating that over 30 years doesn't make it sound like any smaller of a cost.
but then but if you sell on the premise of healthy homes, better indoor environments, that's a lot more abstract, because there's very hard to quantify that at any level. I'm not saying that it isn't possible, but on a one-to-one basis as a contractor or a builder to a consumer, that's really hard to quantify that. So it's more of a subjective thing. It's more of a feeling, right? So but it's an emotional thing. Is that not an easier trigger to get somebody to move toward that than maybe that energy mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think telling someone you're going to protect them from potentially, pandemic level particles or wildfire smoke is going to be a lot more effective than telling them that they're going to save $3 a month on their energy bill or something. I mean, there's definitely an aspect to it there, and also I think with energy, what we've seen is that legislation's kind of gotten to the point where I mean, they're kind of having to offer a lot of those products anyway. I mean, they're already in the home, so that cost is probably being passed on, whereas with health, this is a decision that the builder and the homeowner are making. So
now you're Dave. Okay, John, I'll let you check that.
Real quick, sorry.
That's fine.
And the technology has changed. We do make filters that have lower pressure drop at MERV 16 than a 1-inch filter. So that paradigm is gone. We have smarter controls. So ventilation isn't just turn on a fan and let it run 24/7. It's let us adjust ventilation when it makes sense, right? So I think the paradigm is, we've blown it apart, and we're starting to go down the path of it's smarter, it's better. You don't have to give one up for the other.
Well, I think that's critical. And the thing is, just from a terminology standpoint, you're talking about keywords. Somebody else in the industry I've spent some time with doing some presentations and speaking with Peter Trost from Energy Circle. It does a lot on the marketing side and keyword searching globally for the energy and the HVAC markets and the building performance markets. And he's found that the terms healthy home or healthy homes or those type terms have traditionally far exceeded performance versus indoor air quality or IAQ. I mean, so Dave, you'd mentioned that you're seeing indoor air quality being searched more, and I have too, but I'm just, is that a term now that resonates with consumers? Because it didn't that well before.
Yeah, IAQ or indoor air quality was not something that resonated. I think now it's more of a conversation point. They don't even realize that they're saying a term that we've talked about for years. They understand inside, I'm worried about my air. How do I fix this quality? So they're typing indoor air quality, not realizing that it was an industry term. So I think, the understanding of it that's what they're seeking right now. So that, like I said, one of our key tactics is really being that educator, being the ones that are at the forefront there to provide them with that education.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're jaded with that too. My first company, I still have it at IAQ Technologies. That's my consulting arm, and I came out with that name and came up with the idea in '89 and had it in '90, and I really believe that everybody knew what IAQ stood for. And it's funny because was maybe a year ago, at just a gathering with people that were not industry. That's the other thing. I spent so much time with industry people that, oh yeah, or even commercial people, and it was with my wife and some friends, and they looked at me like I had three heads. Like, what's that? And I'm like, you don't know what IAQ stands for? It's like, because I said, what's your company's IAQ Technologies? What do you do? I'm like, what? You don't know what I do? It's like, seriously? So I mean, I guess my point was there was a point behind that, is that as much as we think we convey the information clearly, I think we may maybe overestimate how people intake that.
Oh, that's very true. I
So
agree.
what do you do? What do you do? Because the thing is, you need to monitor, right? You need to, because I got my feedback, from a group of people looking at me like I had two heads, and I was like, oh, well,
Yeah. Well, I would say it's like with any, new acronym, you talk about IAQ and then just define it, and try to define it for them. So we're talking about IAQ today. We're talking about ventilation, filtration, and humidity control. So if we continue to do that, it will start to get picked up where people will understand, what that means and how they can fix it.
state, restate, and then tell them about what you just stated. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think you have to. Sometimes it seems redundant, but it's like and I think what happens is if you spend too much time in the industry with industry peers, you don't get a real world check on what people are actually understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I recall when I interviewed for April Air, it was IAQ, 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 and I'm like, I don't know what that means,
But you can't admit it,
Yeah, within 30 minutes, I understood what it meant, just because it was continued to be talked about, and then, put two and two together.
So I mean, where does this all land you guys as far as going forward? Like here we are today, we're at the end of 2020, which has just been nothing pretty about this year on any level. And if it continues with the wildfires, and we're probably going to catch another hurricane or two before October closes out, just the way things are going, it seems like we're going to end the year with not much better than we started the year. So how does that look, going forward, where you guys sit in the industry, both from a product development and a marketing standpoint, and how you see things going forward? You can take
I'll comment on in the home building industry. I've certainly seen a number of the trade shows and organizations or groups that we're involved with are really elevated, and they have for years. Honestly, I mean, if you've been to the Energy Environmental Builders Association, EBO, ResNet, those organizations all spend more time every year talking about health, as they mix it in with their energy message. I think moving forward, you're going to continue to see the net zero program and some of these other high performance building programs spend much more time on the health benefits of it. We've gotten these energy efficient net zero homes. Let's focus on the health side of that now to make sure that builders understand, as we talked about a few minutes ago, you don't have to choose one or the other. These are two things that are going to go hand in hand. And I think those organizations are really going to help us continue to make healthy air standard. Despite how long this pandemic carries on, I think we've all come to the realization that we've got to have better air in the home.
I mean, I would say, how about the fact that we've had, a lot of the typical industry events, the face-to-face person events, the big scale shows have either been canceled or delayed or moved online, or, some combination thereof. Does that affect how you get out there as a manufacturer and a provider of products, and like how you get to reach the professional side of your industry, because you're not able to reach them at maybe a big expo right now because there isn't one necessarily.
Yeah, the one thing that's been almost kind of nice about it is I think the people you're talking to are a little bit different. You're meeting a lot more of them on some type of a webinar or format like this, where they're clearly interested in sitting down and getting the 15 to 20 minutes of information. And, we're lucky enough to be in a category that again, as we've been talking about this whole show, is so elevated right now that they're particularly interested in learning more about IAQ. So I think it's been a great opportunity to, some of these people that maybe have a little bit more time on their hand, they're at home. Hey, I'm at my computer. I will sit in on this webinar, and we've seen some record numbers on webinars we've held, other webinars we've been a part of, and they've been very technical, and we've still had a large audience, I think, because they're really trying to wrap their head around this and figure out how they're going to incorporate it and how they're going to market it.
Dave, are you from a marketing standpoint, is that like, do you see your company going, doing more online type engagement? And I mean, we have to do it by necessity now, but I mean, as we go forward and, presumably that we'll, actually have more live in-person events again. Is that going to be a component going forward?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, we'd started the transition into that anyways. We did start to try to put together, a more inclusive training program that was online, because right now we do, a lot of our training was done in person. I would put it at 60% of our training was done in person. So, we are moving to a better program that allows us to have this digital online training for our business side of the business. And then for our consumer side, video is definitely going to become more and more important to us, as it has been over the past few years. But again, I keep saying that this particular pandemic has pushed us at least 3 years ahead, 3 years further faster. So digital and video is definitely a part of our program going forward.
I mean, I've seen that from our perspective, because we've been an online, well, we do print, but we've also been, we started, and our primary focus has been digital publication since 2013. I got involved with, as of 2015, doing a lot of online training, live, bi-directional, actually Zoom, when Zoom first started, we started using it as a training platform. So we've been using it for 5 years. But it was more of a battle. I mean, I spent 5 to 7 years of trying to kind of, encourage people to use online platforms and do more of this type of thing. And it seems like you're right. 3 years, maybe 5 years acceleration in a couple of months, or maybe in 30 days.
I mean, think about the users of Zoom in general. I mean, they went from 100,000 to 500,000 in overnight.
Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and again, we've been using it since they came out, since those guys jumped from Cisco and actually built the platform.
Yeah.
When we first were starting online training, we looked at the different platforms available, and by far at that point, it was, for what it could do with audio and the video quality, it was far better than everything else. Zoom doesn't have the same nice tools around it for the scheduling tools and stuff that some of the other platforms have, but I always found that it had better digital and audio, digital video and audio, which to me is kind of the most important part. But it is interesting, right? That people never heard, like I would see when people get on classes a year ago, they would be challenged trying to figure out how to log into a Zoom meeting. Now that's like your grandmother knows how to do it.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah, I was actually talking to my customer service team last night, and we talked about bringing video even into the customer service calls. I feel like it's going to speed things up so much faster if we can actually talk about the product and even bring it up and show it. Some things those are some of the other things that we're trying to bring into the business too.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing live stream hybrid events with Healthy Indoors for a couple of years now. Predominantly the IAQ and Energy Show that takes place in Portland, Maine, and that's gone fully virtual this year. So they're doing online trade shows. Have you guys had experience doing any virtual events like that, and being on an online trade show? Because I see so many different tiers of what that can be. Like sometimes it's just awful, but I think it has the promise to be something really powerful.
I agree. I think Joseph has one coming up this week.
Yeah, we've actually got 2 coming up. I believe next week or the week after. That EBA's Summit, I mentioned them earlier, has gone virtual this year. That's one of those ones that I think is kind of a good fit for a virtual show because it's very education oriented. I mean, most of the show is spent in tracks. Obviously losing the network part of it is unfortunate, but they've come up with some ways. I think there's actually a virtual happy hour, which, as crazy as that sounds, a lot of people have been doing that.
We've been doing those.
Yeah,
it's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that's going to be really interesting. The Tech Home has one too. That's one where, traditionally it's been about smaller one-on-one meetings or again, a small 20-minute kind of pitch. So, this we'll still be able to do that. I just have to do it virtually. I think, the big question will be, what does attendance look like at those events? I think conveying the message and making the connections is more than possible. It'll just be if the people on the other end show up.
I mean, it's a challenge. One thing that I see, as a producer of events like this, is the challenge is getting attendees to click into the virtual booths, which are effectively landing pages, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you walk down the aisle of a show, in an in-person show, you can see stuff. So the vendor, by having, aesthetically appealing stuff and flashing lights or whatever they do, can draw your attention. But it's really hard when you got to force them to click a button to see any of your wares.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that's the
what's
challenge.
that? You've got a 10x10 versus a 10x20 or a 10x30. What you're paying for right there is more aisle space. How does that, how do you do that in a non-live show?
The floor plan, you just give them the bigger boxes at the top of the floor plan. I mean, it's like you kind of do, but it's still, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I mean, do you see, John, do you see like a lot of, do you see changes on how we're going to look on things from the technical side, and just how we're going to, disseminate that information, out to both the contractor construction world and then beyond to the end user consumers?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting time for indoor air quality, which no one knew what it meant a week ago. In that we're going to be designing products more and more for the consumer. I mean, we were in an age where we were designing for, I'll call it the contractor. We talked about MERVs and pressure drops, and and it didn't matter if it was a square metal box. Where now we're going to be designing products for consumers because they want it, and it's going to be, what user interfaces do we give them? And they're going to want simple and easy. They don't want to complicate their lives. So it's going to change our product development a little bit, in that we're going to be more focused right to the consumer, and the fun and exciting things that bring along with it when you're dealing with the consumer versus a contractor. So I think you're going to see some real exciting things in products in this area. It's not going to be your metal box anymore.
I mean, do you deal? So here's a good question, just for clarification. Is your market for your firm more new construction or retrofit, or is it kind of split?
It's kind of split.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yep.
So we're getting toward the waning minutes of the show. So this is where Joe Medosh, who would normally be here as my co-pilot, and is out and about somewhere other than at the show today, would be asking the question of, we want to get some closing thoughts. So this is going to be your chance to jump on board and make that burning point that I didn't lead you on for. So in no particular order, since Dave's at the top of my screen, at least I'm going to throw it at Dave first and say, give us your thoughts about where we are, where we should be going. Just take a little run.
Yeah. So indoor air quality is here to stay. The idea of fresh air ventilation, filtration, and humidity control. Is that the third time I've said that today?
Yeah.
Is not going to go away. So it's an exciting time to be in this industry. It's an exciting time, to be alive. I mean, health is a trend that isn't going away either. I mean, think about all the devices on your wrist. We talked about it before the show started, the device that goes in your skull. Being able to improve people's lives with what we do it's empowering. I think it's a great time to be in this field. Excellent.
John, now, I'm not picking on you because you're one of the older guys here, because we're probably the same age. But you've been around for a while in the industry, and I mean that in all respect. Saying, so you've had a chance to see how things have evolved. Having worked in the industry, through kind of the advent of indoor air quality and that whole term being coined, right? I mean, we've unfortunately been around for most of that.
Yeah.
So it has evolved a bit, but have we evolved that much in the last 30 years when we started talking about IAQ? And will we evolve faster as a result of where we are now?
Over 30 years, no. Over the last 3 to 4, yes. And I think we're on that curve going straight up now. It's going, like you guys were talking about earlier, it is a word that now the homeowner understands, the homeowner wants, You know, for the first 35 years of those 40s, it was the geeks in the back room. Now it's forefront, and it's exciting times. It's, you know, a career now that's paying off. They're saying this is what we've been talking about all along. So, and the challenge will just be, how do we make it easier, better, and more efficient for everyone involved in the whole home process?
I mean, clearly, I think, 2020 has, probably set itself up as a catalyst for maybe some change, or an opportunity for things to change faster, certainly. So, Joseph, I'm going to let you do the wrap up shot here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts going forward with it?
I'll follow suit and say I think it's going to be all positive. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we had these sort of elements that all came together: energy efficiency, smart home technology, and just the health and wellness trends that already existed. And this has just pushed those, ever upward. I think it's going to be a fantastic year in 2021 to see these homes continue to be built more healthy from the ground up, to see more of that standardized on. I think the technology change that John talked about earlier is also integral. I mean, energy efficiency got us here. I think smart home is what took this stuff out of the mechanicals. It took it out of the basement. It took it out of a closet, and it put it in people's hands so that they can interact with it. And, consumers want to play with the things in their home. And this gives them a chance to do that. It allows them to feel like they're being proactive about their health using their HVAC system. So I'm very excited about the year to come.
Yeah, it does look like it has the opportunity to make some substantive change pretty fast, which is pretty exciting. And I can say the same thing for me too. I've been in the industry since mid 80s, and it seems like this year, for better or for worse, as things have started moving pretty fast, which is good. So now I'll do a shameless plug for Healthy Indoors magazine. This is something that you should, if you don't currently get, first of all, it's very inexpensive. It's so inexpensive, it's free. So that's like, what an easy sales pitch. So we are a monthly digital publication. We are soon to be releasing our quarterly digital global edition, which will be similar in a way to our flagship USA edition of Healthy Indoors, but will be more world-centric, covering articles from around the globe on indoor environmental issues. You can get to all of our stuff and all of our assets, our articles, our digital issues of the magazine, the Healthy Indoors show that you're watching, our audio podcast of this show, all at healthyindoors.com. Real simple. So we highly recommend, if you haven't already done so, get there and check it out. And you can also hit the subscribe button, and you can sign up to get the magazine e-blasted to you every month for free. The good news about that is that we don't rent or sell our email list. So if you do give us, you will share your information with us, we won't share it with anyone else. So that's a good thing. I hate spam. I really do. And I will not be part of that. That's one of the things, vendors are always like, our advertisers, like, can we rent your list? It's like, no, sorry. We just don't do that. And a lot of publications do, it's just, anyway, with that, I gotta thank you guys so much. So John Blomer, Dave Carlson, and Joseph Hillenmeyer from April Air, thanks so very much for joining us today. This is a great conversation. This went quite well. I thought we covered a lot of information. We could have went another hour easily. We just scraped the surface.
Thank you very much, Ben.
But I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy days to do this, and I think it was very informative. And look forward to having you join us again sometime. So this was great.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob.
So with that, it's that time, kids. So for the Healthy Indoors show and Healthy Indoors magazine, I'm your host, Bob Krell. I will see you next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, 1 p.m. Eastern, here at healthyindoors.com.